The night was eerily silent as Derek stepped off the military transport, his boots crunching against the gravel beneath him. The base hummed with quiet efficiency, soldiers moving like shadows under the dim glow of overhead lights. This was supposed to be a fresh start, an opportunity to prove himself among the elite. But from the moment he walked into the barracks, he felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken judgments. Eyes flickered in his direction, assessing, measuring. He caught the smirk of a soldier leaning against his bunk, Travis Moore. "Looks like they're letting just about anyone in these days," Travis muttered, just loud enough for the room to hear. A couple of men chuckled, but Derek didn't react. He'd faced worse. He dropped his bag onto the cot and started unpacking, his movements calm, deliberate. Eliana sat on the far side of the room, polishing her rifle. She didn't join in the laughter, but she didn't defend him either. She had seen this pattern play out before, new blood getting tested, pushed. Some crumbled. Some fought back too hard and ended up in trouble. The smart ones? They endured. She studied Derek from the corner of her eye, noting the quiet determination in his posture. Travis wasn't done. He walked over, towering over Derek with a smug grin. "You sure you belong here?" His voice dripped with condescension. "Or did someone pull strings for you?" Derek zipped up his duffel, finally meeting Travis's gaze. "You'll find out soon enough." His voice was even, unwavering. The tension in the room thickened. Eliana shifted slightly, her fingers tightening around the barrel of her rifle. She could see it, the way Travis's smirk faltered just a fraction. But before he could push further, the overhead speaker crackled. "All recruits, report to the field in 10 minutes. Training begins now." Derek grabbed his gear and moved past Travis without another word. Eliana watched him go, a small smirk playing on her lips. Maybe this one wouldn't break so easily. The field was a brutal expanse of dirt and sweat, the kind of place where weakness wasn't just exposed, it was crushed. Derek stood in line with the others, his expression unreadable as the drill sergeant paced in front of them. The night air was thick with tension, and the scent of damp earth clung to his uniform. "Welcome to hell," Sergeant Hayes barked, his voice cutting through the silence. "This isn't your high school football team. This is where warriors are made, or where cowards break. And trust me, I'll know the difference before the sun rises." Derek kept his posture rigid, his focus unwavering, but he could feel the eyes on him, Travis's stare burning into the side of his face. He knew the type. He'd dealt with men like him before. They pushed, they prodded, waiting for a reaction. But Derek wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. 10 miles, Hayes announced. "Full gear. If I catch anyone slacking, you'll be crawling back to base." The pack took off, boots pounding against the hard-packed dirt. Derek moved with steady precision, controlling his breathing. Around him, soldiers grunted under the weight of their packs, the strain evident on their faces. Travis stayed close. His breath labored, but his intent clear. "Don't slow down now, Carter," he taunted. "Wouldn't want anyone thinking you can't keep up." Derek didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his pace. One by one, soldiers started to fall behind, their strength failing under the relentless demand of the course. But Derek kept going, his muscles burning, his lungs screaming, but he refused to stop. By the final stretch, only a handful of them remained at the front. Eliana was among them, her expression impassive as she matched Derek's stride. She was impressed, not that she'd admit it. Travis, however, was slipping. His steps were uneven, his breathing ragged, And then it happened. A misstep, a stumble, and he went down hard, dust rising in a thick cloud around him. The other soldiers rushed past without a glance, but Derek hesitated for half a second. He could leave Travis behind. He had every right to. Instead, he reached down, offering his hand. Travis looked up, humiliation flashing in his eyes. But before he could respond, Hayes's voice cut through the night. "Move or stay down more!" Travis slapped Derek's hand away and forced himself up, shooting him a glare filled with something close to hatred. Derek said nothing, falling back into pace, but he knew this was just the beginning. The barracks were dead silent when Derek walked in, his muscles aching from the brutal training session. Sweat clung to his skin, but he barely noticed. He had pushed himself harder than he had in months, and it had paid off. He had finished among the top, proving that he belonged. But he knew the battle wasn't over. The real war wasn't against the obstacle courses or drills. It was against the men who didn't want him there. As he moved toward his bunk, Travis's voice sliced through the quiet. "You think you're something special, Carter." Derek didn't pause. He unzipped his gear bag, pulling out a clean shirt, ignoring the provocation. "You got lucky today," Travis continued, stepping closer. "Don't mistake endurance for skill. You'll mess up eventually. And when you do, no one's going to cover for you." Eliana, who had been cleaning her sidearm, flicked her gaze toward them. She didn't interfere, but she was listening. Everyone in the barracks was. Derek turned to face Travis, his expression unreadable. "I don't need anyone to cover for me," he said evenly. Travis let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "You don't belong here, Carter. You should have stayed wherever the hell you came from." The tension in the room thickened, the air heavy with unspoken challenges. For a split second, Derek considered his options. He could ignore Travis, let him run his mouth until he got bored, or he could end this right here, right now. Instead, he took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Then make me leave," he said, his tone sharp as a blade. A muscle in Travis's jaw twitched. He wasn't expecting that. He had been hoping for anger, for a defensive reaction, something to prove his point. But Derek wasn't giving him that. He was challenging him in a way that was more dangerous than fists. Before Travis could respond, the lights in the barracks shut off. "Lights out" call. The moment was broken, but the hostility remained. As Derek lay down, he could still feel Travis's glare boring into him. He knew this wasn't over. If anything, it was only getting started. Morning came too soon. The sharp blast of the reveille horn shattered the fragile peace of sleep, and Derek was on his feet before the echoes faded. He moved on instinct, boots laced, uniform sharp, mind already preparing for whatever fresh hell the day would bring. Outside, the training grounds were a battlefield in their own right. Soldiers stretching, testing sore muscles, exchanging hushed conversations about the day's drills. The air smelled of damp earth and sweat, a mixture that had become all too familiar. Eliana was already there, leaning against a weapons rack, her arms crossed as she surveyed the group. She had seen the way Derek handled himself, the way he refused to be broken. It intrigued her, though she'd never say it out loud. "Carter," a voice barked. "Sergeant Hayes." Derek snapped to attention as the grizzled officer approached, his sharp gaze scanning him up and down. "You held your own yesterday," Hayes said, his tone unreadable. "Let's see if that wasn't just beginner's luck." A ripple of interest passed through the soldiers, including Travis, who had been stretching nearby. His lip curled in amusement, but there was something darker in his eyes. Resentment, maybe even a hint of doubt. The morning drill was a test of endurance. Obstacle courses, hand-to-hand combat, tactical formations. Derek didn't just keep up. He thrived. Every muscle in his body burned, but he pushed forward, refusing to falter. He had to be better, stronger, smarter. Then came the combat rounds. Paired up randomly, each soldier had to prove their ability in one-on-one sparring. Travis got called first, taking down his opponent with practiced ease. When Derek's name was called, a smirk spread across Travis's face. "Let's see if you can still stand after this," he muttered under his breath. Derek stepped into the circle, his opponent a tall, broad-shouldered soldier named Reed. The moment the whistle blew, Reed charged, fists swinging. Derek dodged, quick and calculated, striking back with controlled force. He took a hit to the ribs, but barely registered the pain. Within moments, Reed was on the ground, gasping for breath. Derek's arm locked around his throat in a perfect takedown. Silence followed. Then, the sharp whistle. Winner, Carter. Travis's smirk disappeared. Eliana raised an eyebrow, impressed despite herself. But Derek knew this wasn't the victory that mattered. The real fight was still coming. The tension in the barracks was palpable after the morning drills. Derek had proven himself again, but instead of earning respect, he had only deepened the resentment festering among some of the soldiers, especially Travis. He could feel the weight of their stares as he walked to his bunk, sweat still clinging to his skin. Eliana sat on her cot, lazily cleaning her weapon. "You've got their attention," she remarked without looking up. Derek dropped onto his bed, running a hand over his face. "Not the kind I need." Eliana smirked. "It's the only kind you're going to get." Before he could respond, the barracks door slammed open. Sergeant Hayes strode in, his presence demanding immediate silence. "All of you, listen up!" His voice boomed across the room. "We've got an unannounced combat assessment. No teams, one-on-one, full intensity. This isn't just training, it's evaluation." A murmur ran through the soldiers. Unannounced combat assessments meant one thing. Command was watching, and command didn't tolerate weakness. Travis leaned against his locker, arms crossed, his eyes locking onto Derek. "Looks like you get to prove yourself all over again, Carter." Derek didn't reply. He simply stood, adjusting his gear. He wasn't here to prove himself to Travis. He was here for something much bigger. Minutes later, the entire unit stood outside on the combat field. The sun was ruthless, baking the earth beneath their boots. The matchups were called at random, and one by one, soldiers clashed under the scrutinizing eyes of their superiors. Then came the moment Derek had been expecting. "Carter, Moore, step forward." A slow grin spread across Travis's face. This was what he had been waiting for. The moment the whistle blew, Travis lunged. No hesitation, no testing. He wanted to end this fast, but Derek was ready. He sidestepped, using Travis's momentum against him, sending him stumbling forward. Travis recovered quickly, coming back with a flurry of strikes, calculated, aggressive. Derek blocked, absorbed, countered. The fight was brutal, their movements sharp and precise. Then Travis did something unexpected. He feinted left but swung hard with his right, his fist connecting with Derek's jaw. Pain exploded through him, but he didn't go down. Instead, he smiled. Travis's confidence faltered for a split second, and that was all Derek needed. The impact of Travis's punch sent a sharp jolt through Derek's jaw, but he barely flinched. Instead, he rolled his shoulders, tasting blood where his lip had split, and gave Travis a slow, knowing smirk. The reaction was enough to throw his opponent off. Travis had expected him to stumble, to falter, but Derek wasn't like the others. Travis came in again, faster this time, using his weight to drive Derek back. He was stronger, but Derek was smarter. He let Travis get close, then pivoted at the last second, dodging the blow and delivering a sharp elbow to his ribs. The crack echoed through the field. Travis grunted in pain but refused to stop. His next attack was wild, fueled more by frustration than strategy. Derek sidestepped easily, catching Travis's arm and twisting him off balance. The moment Travis hit the ground, Derek was on him, pinning him with a calculated hold. "Enough!" Sergeant Hayes's voice cut through the fight, sharp and commanding. The whistle blew, signaling the end. Derek released Travis and stepped back, his breathing steady despite the bruises forming along his arms. Travis, however, stayed down for a moment longer, his expression a mix of shock and barely contained rage. "Winner? Carter?" A few murmurs rippled through the watching soldiers. Some looked impressed. Others exchanged unreadable glances. But the most telling reaction came from Eliana, her lips pressed together in the ghost of a smirk, her eyes glinting with something close to approval. Travis stood slowly, his fists clenched at his sides. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath as he brushed past Derek. "I never thought it was," Derek replied, voice calm. Hayes, however, wasn't done. His gaze swept over the group before settling on Derek. "You fight well, Carter. But don't get cocky. Skill means nothing without discipline." Derek nodded. "Yes, sir." Hayes studied him for a second longer, then moved on, barking orders for the next match. As Derek walked off the field, he caught Eliana watching him. This time, she didn't look away. "Not bad," she said as he passed. That sounded suspiciously like a compliment, Derek shot back. Eliana smirked. "Don't get used to it." But Derek wasn't worried about compliments. He was more focused on the storm brewing behind Travis's eyes, because this wasn't over. Not even close. The evening air was thick with tension. The barracks were quieter than usual, but not in a peaceful way, more like the stillness before a storm. Derek could feel it, the weight of unspoken challenges hanging in the air. Travis hadn't said a word since their fight, but his silence was more dangerous than his insults ever were. Derek sat on his bunk, absently rolling his shoulder where a bruise had already started to form. Across the room, Eliana was dismantling her rifle with practiced ease, her expression unreadable. "You made an enemy today," she said without looking up. Derek smirked. Wasn't he already won? Eliana glanced at him then, her dark eyes sharp. "There's a difference between being disliked and being targeted. Travis doesn't take humiliation well. He's going to come for you." Derek leaned back against the wall, stretching out his legs. "Let him." Eliana shook her head, setting a freshly cleaned part of her rifle aside. "You're tough, Carter, but you're not invincible. Watch your back." Before he could respond, the barracks door slammed open. A few soldiers barely looked up, but Derek knew exactly who it was before he even turned his head. Travis. He walked in slow, controlled steps, his knuckles still red from their fight earlier. A few of his usual guys trailed behind him, not close enough to make it obvious, but enough to send a message. For a second, it looked like Travis might start something right then and there, but instead, he stopped a few feet from Derek's bunk, his jaw tight. "You got lucky today," Travis said, voice low but carrying enough weight that the nearby soldiers subtly tuned in. Derek didn't rise to the bait. He simply held Travis's gaze, unflinching. Travis took a slow breath, then smirked. Enjoy it while it lasts. Then, just as suddenly as he'd come, he turned and walked out, his crew following. Derek exhaled, rubbing his temple. He knew a warning when he heard one. Eliana finished reassembling her rifle and set it down beside her. Told you. Derek chuckled. Guess I'll be watching my back after all. Eliana didn't smile, didn't joke. She just studied him for a moment before shaking her head. Just make sure you don't get caught alone. The barracks lights dimmed, signaling lights out, but Derek remained awake. The tension from earlier still lingered, curling in his gut like a warning he couldn't shake. He had dealt with men like Travis before, men who hated losing more than they hated their enemies. And Travis had lost. That meant one thing. This wasn't over. He lay on his bunk, eyes on the ceiling, listening to the slow, steady breaths of the other soldiers. Sleep didn't come easy in a place like this, not when you knew that strength wasn't just tested in the daylight. Sometimes the real battles happened in the dark. A sound, software, almost imperceptible. But Derek caught it. A shuffle, a deliberate pause like someone moving with practiced quiet. His muscles tensed. He turned his head slightly, scanning the dimly lit barracks. Nothing. But then, movement. A shadow shifting near the back, where the lockers stood. Derek's instincts screamed at him. He swung his legs over the side of his bunk, keeping his movements slow, deliberate. He didn't want to spook whoever was there. Eliana, from the cot opposite him, stirred slightly, eyes flickering open just enough to meet his. She had heard it too. Derek pushed to his feet, keeping his breathing steady. The room was silent except for the occasional creak of a bed frame as soldiers shifted in their sleep. He moved toward the lockers, every step careful. Then, in a blink, the silence shattered. A figure lunged. Fast. A flash of movement in the dark. Derek barely had time to react before something sharp whistled through the air. He dodged just in time, the blade missing his face by inches. His back hit the cold metal lockers as he caught sight of his attacker, Travis. No hesitation. No words. Just violence. Travis came at him again, this time aiming lower, but Derek was faster. He sidestepped, grabbing Travis's wrist mid-strike and twisting. The knife clattered to the floor, but Travis wasn't done. He drove his shoulder into Derek, slamming him hard against the lockers. A grunt, a sharp jolt of pain. And then Derek reacted. He brought his elbow down hard against Travis's arm, forcing him to loosen his grip. Then, using Travis's own momentum, Derek flipped him, sending him crashing onto the floor. Before Travis could recover, a sharp click echoed through the room. A rifle was loaded. Eliana stood at the edge of the barracks, her weapon raised. Enough, she said, her voice low, dangerous. Travis froze. So did Derek. The room was awake now, soldiers stirring, whispers rising. But the only thing Derek focused on was the seething hatred in Travis's eyes. This was war now. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Soldiers sat up in their bunks, some half awake, others fully alert, their eyes darting between Derek, Travis, and Eliana, who still held her rifle steady. "Lower it," Derek said quietly, his voice even, but his pulse was racing. Eliana didn't move. Her grip on the weapon was firm, her gaze locked onto Travis, as if she knew. If she hesitated, he'd strike again. Travis, still on the floor, wiped the side of his mouth where he had hit the ground. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but his eyes, burning with humiliation, never left Derek. "She's saving you," Travis muttered. "No," Derek replied, stepping back just enough to ease the tension. "She's saving you." Travis's jaw tightened, but before he could say anything, the door to the barracks flew open. Sergeant Hayes. His sharp gaze swept over the room, taking in the scene. The knife on the floor, Travis still down, Derek standing over him, Eliana with her rifle raised. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on?" His voice was calm, but the kind of calm that came before an explosion. No one spoke. Hayes stepped forward, his boots heavy against the wooden floor. He looked at Derek first. "Carter?" Derek clenched his jaw. He could tell the truth. Tell Hayes that Travis had come after him with a knife, that this wasn't just some barracks fight. It was an attack. But something told him that wouldn't end it. It would only escalate things. So instead, he bent down, picked up the knife, and placed it on an empty bunk. "Nothing, sir," he said finally. "Just a misunderstanding." Hayes's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered with something, understanding, maybe, or disappointment. He turned to Travis. "That true?" Travis hesitated. He had been ready to fight, ready to attack, but now, under Hayes's scrutiny, he knew he couldn't afford to admit what had really happened. "Yes, sir," he muttered. Hayes exhaled sharply. "Both of you. Outside. Now." Derek didn't flinch. He knew this was coming. As he stepped past Eliana, she caught his sleeve. "You should have told him," she whispered. Derek glanced at her. And then what? She had no answer. Outside, the night was cool, but the tension was suffocating. And Derek knew this wasn't over, not even close. The night air was sharp against Derek's skin as he stepped outside, Travis only a few feet behind him. Sergeant Hayes followed, his expression unreadable, hands clasped behind his back as he paced in front of them. The silence stretched, heavy and unrelenting. Derek kept his posture straight, his hands at his sides. Travis, on the other hand, shifted slightly, his jaw clenched. He wasn't afraid. No, Travis didn't know how to be afraid. But he was calculating, trying to decide his next move. Finally, Hayes stopped and turned to face them. "I don't care what the hell happened in there," he said, his voice low but firm. "I don't care about your pride, your personal grudges, or whatever stupid pissing contest you two have going on. What I do care about is this unit, and right now, both of you are a liability." Derek didn't flinch. He had expected this. "Travis," Hayes continued, shifting his attention, "you think I don't know what you did? You think I haven't seen recruits like you before? You're reckless, and worse, you're predictable. You let your anger control you, and that makes you weak." Travis's nostrils flared, but he didn't speak. Hayes turned to Derek. "And you," he said, his gaze sharp, "you could have spoken up. Could have told me what really happened. Instead, you played it safe. That tells me two things. You're smart, but you're also willing to let things slide. That's not always a bad thing, but in the wrong moment, it can cost lives." Derek met Hayes's stare, his pulse steady. Hayes exhaled through his nose, then took a step closer. "You both want to act like men? Then settle this like soldiers. No more sneak attacks. No more after-hours fights." He let that sink in before stepping back. "Tomorrow morning, field drills. You two will be paired. That means if one of you screws up, you both do. If one of you falls, the other carries him." Travis's hands curled into fists, but he stayed quiet. Hayes's gaze lingered on them both before he gave a single nod. dismissed. Derek turned without another word, heading back inside. He could feel Travis's glare burning into his back, but he didn't acknowledge it. As he stepped into the barracks, Eliana was still awake, watching him. "How bad?" she asked. Derek let out a slow breath. "Bad enough." She didn't reply, just studied him before shaking her head. "Get some rest. You'll need it." And for the first time that night, Derek agreed. Morning came too soon. The sharp blast of the bugle ripped through the barracks, pulling Derek from an uneasy sleep. His body ached from the fight the night before, but he pushed himself up without hesitation. Across the room, Travis was already sitting on the edge of his bunk, lacing his boots, his expression unreadable. Eliana met Derek's gaze as she pulled on her jacket. "You ready for this?" Derek smirked, rolling his shoulder. "Like I have a choice." The field was wet with morning dew, the sky still tinged with early dawn gray. The rest of the unit had gathered, stretching and preparing for drills, but all eyes were on Derek and Travis. The tension between them was impossible to ignore. Sergeant Hayes stood at the front, arms crossed. "Pair drills," he barked. "That means if your partner falls, you don't leave them behind. If they slow down, you push them forward. We work as one or we fail as one. Understood?" A chorus of, "Yes, sir," echoed through the field. Hayes's gaze landed on Derek and Travis. "You two? You laid the run." A slow smirk crept across Travis's face. "Can't wait." Derek ignored him, focusing on his breathing. He had nothing to prove. He just had to get through this. The whistle blew, and they were off. The first lap around the field was easy. Both Derek and Travis were in top shape. Their strides even, their breathing controlled. But Hayes wasn't going to let them off that easy. "Pick up the pace," he shouted. They ran harder. By the fifth lap, the burn had set in. The weight of their gear, the strain in their legs, it was relentless. But neither of them slowed. Then came the obstacle course. Climbing walls, crawling under barbed wire, carrying heavy packs through the mud. It wasn't just about speed now. It was about endurance. And Derek could feel Travis pushing, trying to get ahead, to prove something. When they reached the rope climb, Travis shot Derek a smirk before grabbing the rope and scaling it with quick, powerful movements. Derek followed, his grip firm, muscles burning. As he reached the top, Travis was already moving down. For a split second, Derek could see it, the challenge in Travis's eyes. This wasn't just a drill to him. It was a fight, and neither of them was willing to lose. The sun climbed higher as the drills pushed them to their limits. Sweat soaked through Derek's uniform, his muscles screaming in protest. But he didn't slow down. Neither did Travis. They moved in sync, driven by sheer determination and an unspoken rivalry. The rest of the unit had finished the course, but Hayes wasn't done with them yet. "Fireman carry," he ordered, voice sharp. "One of you goes down, the other carries him across the field. Move!" Derek barely had a second to react before Travis turned to him, a mocking grin stretching across his face. "Better hope I don't drop you, Carter." "Better hope you can lift me, Connors," Derek shot back. Hayes's whistle blew, and Travis lunged first, throwing Derek over his shoulders in one swift motion. The moment Travis took his first step, Derek felt the strain in his stance. Travis was strong, but Derek wasn't light. Travis staggered slightly but recovered, pushing forward with gritted teeth. The field stretched endlessly before them, the weight on his back growing heavier with each step. His breath turned ragged, his pace slowing. Move faster, Connors! Hayes barked. Travis growled under his breath and forced himself forward. 10 more steps. 5. Then his knee buckled. For the first time, Derek felt Travis's body give out beneath him. He was falling. With instinct honed by years of training, Derek twisted midair, landing hard on his feet. Before Travis could hit the ground, Derek caught his arm, pulling him back upright. "You good?" Derek asked, panting. Travis yanked his arm free, anger flashing in his eyes. "I don't need your help." "Yeah? Your knee says otherwise." Before Travis could argue, Hayes's whistle cut through the air. "Switch!" Travis hesitated, jaw clenched, but he had no choice. He allowed Derek to hoist him over his shoulders. Unlike Travis, Derek moved swiftly, each step steady, carrying him across the field without faltering. When they finally reached the finish, Derek let Travis down gently. Hayes studied them both, nodding slightly. "Better, but not good enough. Again." Travis's fists clenched, but Derek just nodded. As they took their positions again, Derek glanced at Travis. "You're gonna have to trust me at some point." Travis didn't answer, but for the first time, he didn't look away. This fight between them wasn't over, but something had shifted. The day dragged on with relentless drills, each one designed to break them down piece by piece. Sweat blurred Derek's vision, his body moving on autopilot, but he refused to slow. Travis was beside him every step of the way, neither willing to show weakness in front of the other. By the time they reached the final challenge, a full-gear sprint with weighted packs, Derek's lungs burned. Hayes's voice cut through the exhaustion. "You fall behind. You start over. Together." Travis shot Derek a glance, his usual arrogance replaced with something more serious. They weren't just competing anymore. If one failed, both suffered. The whistle blew, and they took off. Each step was agony, the weight pulling at their shoulders, their boots sinking into the dirt. The rest of the unit had finished their drills and now stood on the sidelines, watching. Eliana's voice cut through the noise. "Come on, Derek." He didn't look her way, too focused on the finish line ahead. Travis was right beside him, his breathing labored but steady. Then it happened. Travis's foot caught on a loose patch of dirt. His balance wavered, and in an instant, he was falling. Everything slowed. Derek could have kept going, could have crossed that finish line and left Travis to deal with Hayes's wrath, but he didn't. Instead, he reached out, instinct, training, something deeper driving him, and grabbed Travis's arm before he hit the ground. "Get up," Derek gritted out, pulling him forward. Travis cursed under his breath but didn't resist. Together, they pushed forward, step after agonizing step, until finally, they crossed the finish line. The moment they stopped, Travis wrenched his arm away, his face twisted with frustration. "I didn't need your help." Derek let out a dry laugh, hands on his knees as he caught his breath. "Yeah? You're welcome anyway." Before Travis could respond, Hayes stepped forward. His gaze lingered on them for a moment before he spoke. "That," he said, "is how you survive out there." Neither Derek nor Travis spoke, still catching their breath, but something unspoken passed between them. Maybe, just maybe, this war between them wasn't about proving who was stronger. Maybe it was about proving they could survive together. The barracks were quieter than usual that night. The exhaustion from the drills had drained everyone, leaving only the sound of boots hitting the floor and the occasional rustle of sheets. Derek sat on the edge of his bunk, rolling his shoulders to ease the tension. Across from him, Travis was silent, staring at the ceiling. Eliana walked in, her sharp gaze flicking between the two of them. "You both look like hell." "Feel worse," Derek muttered, running a hand through his damp hair. Travis didn't respond, but his fists clenched at his sides. Something was brewing behind those dark eyes, frustration, maybe anger. Derek couldn't tell. Eliana crossed her arms. "You should be resting, not brooding." "I don't brood," Derek shot back, but there was no heat behind his words. She smirked, then tossed him a water bottle before doing the same to Travis. "Hydrate before you collapse." Travis caught the bottle without a word, his jaw still tight. The silence stretched, heavy and unspoken. Then finally, Travis exhaled. "Why'd you do it?" Derek glanced up. "Do what?" "You could have left me back there. Finished the run alone." Eliana's gaze sharpened as she looked between them. Derek leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "That's not how this works." Travis scoffed. "This isn't a damn buddy system, Carter." "No," Derek agreed, his voice steady. "But out there in real combat, we don't leave each other behind." Travis didn't answer right away. His grip tightened around the water bottle, his breathing even. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "I don't need saving." Derek didn't argue. Instead, he simply said, "Good. Because neither do I." Eliana watched them both, her expression unreadable. "Well, that's progress. Sort of." Travis let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, sure." For the first time since they met, the tension between them wasn't just about resentment or competition. It was something else. A reluctant understanding. Maybe they weren't friends. But maybe, just maybe, they weren't enemies anymore either. The night air outside the barracks was cool, a sharp contrast to the heat still lingering in Derek's muscles. He stepped out, letting the quiet settle over him. The stars above stretched endlessly, a reminder of how small their battles here were compared to the real war waiting for them beyond training grounds. Footsteps crunched against the gravel behind him. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. Travis stopped beside him, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the sky. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Travis exhaled, his voice low. "You ever think about what comes after this?" Derek glanced at him. "After training?" "After everything." The question settled between them like a weight. It wasn't something soldiers were supposed to think about, not when they had missions, orders, a purpose dictated for them. But Derek had. "Yeah," he admitted. "I think about it." Travis's jaw tightened. "And I don't have an answer." Silence stretched again. Finally, Travis let out a humorless chuckle. "Figures." Derek studied him. The usual cocky edge was gone, replaced by something heavier. He had seen that look before, in soldiers who had lost too much too soon. "Why'd you enlist?" Derek asked. Travis hesitated. "Does it matter?" "It does if it's the only thing keeping you here." Travis inhaled sharply, then ran a hand over his face. "I didn't have a choice." Derek didn't press, but something in the way Travis's voice wavered told him there was more. More than the arrogance. More than the competition. For the first time, he saw Travis not as the rival he had been fighting against since day one, but as someone carrying a burden just as heavy as his own. "You do now," Derek said quietly. "You choose to keep going." Travis scoffed. "Like it's that easy." "It's not." A beat passed. Then Travis shook his head. "Damn, I hate that you're actually making sense." Derek smirked. "Miracles happen." Travis let out a short laugh, shaking his head again. Don't push it, Carter. But something had changed. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand each other. Morning came too soon. The sharp blast of the wake-up call echoed through the barracks, dragging Derek out of the light sleep he had managed. His muscles protested as he swung his legs over the bunk, but there was no time for hesitation. Another day, another set of grueling drills. Across the room, Travis was already up, lacing his boots with quick, precise movements. Their conversation from the night before still lingered in Derek's mind, but neither of them acknowledged it. There was an unspoken rule here. Whatever was said in the quiet of night stayed there. Eliana appeared at the door, arms crossed. "You two ready for hell?" Derek smirked. "Always." Travis just rolled his eyes, grabbing his gear. The training ground was already sweltering under the morning sun. Sergeant Hayes stood at the front, his sharp gaze sweeping over them like a predator assessing its prey. "Today's lesson is simple," he said. "Survival." A low murmur passed through the group. Hayes's expression didn't change. "You're being deployed in a simulation. Live rounds, real conditions. If you fail here, you don't make it out there." The tension in the air thickened. "Teams of 2, Hayes continued. "You fail, you both restart." Derek didn't need to look to know who he'd be paired with. "Connors, Carter, you're up first." Travis let out a short breath, then nodded. "Of course we are." Eliana smirked as she stepped back. "Try not to kill each other before the simulation does." Derek and Travis moved toward the staging area, strapping on their gear. "You trust me to watch your back?" Derek asked, tightening the strap on his vest. Travis gave him a side glance. "I trust you not to screw up." Derek chuckled. "Close enough." The siren blared. The simulation had begun. They sprinted into the mock battlefield, dodging through the rubble of an artificial war zone. Smoke filled the air, obscuring their vision. Gunfire, blanks, but loud enough to send adrenaline surging, ripped through the silence. Then came the first real test. An ambush. Figures emerged from the smoke, rifles raised. Travis cursed. "Move!" Derek didn't hesitate. He hit the ground as bullets whizzed past, heart pounding. This wasn't just training anymore. This was war. The air was thick with smoke, burning Derek's lungs as he crouched behind a crumbling concrete barrier. The sound of gunfire rattled through the training ground, each shot a reminder that this wasn't just an exercise in endurance. It was a test of survival. Travis was beside him, his breath steady despite the chaos. "They've got us pinned," he muttered, peeking over the barrier. Derek's grip tightened around his rifle. Even though the rounds were simulated, the pressure was real. He knew Hayes was watching, waiting to see who would break first. "2 on the left, 1 on the rooftop," Travis continued, his voice clipped. "They're covering all angles." Derek scanned the area, mind racing. "We need a distraction." "Yeah? Got any bright ideas?" Derek smirked, pulling a smoke grenade from his vest. "Just one." Before Travis could argue, he pulled the pin and launched it forward. The canister clattered against the ground before releasing thick plumes of white smoke. "Go!" They moved as one, instincts kicking in. Derek darted left, firing controlled bursts at their attackers while Travis sprinted forward. The figures in the smoke hesitated. Just enough time for Travis to take out the rooftop threat with a well-placed shot. 1 down. But the remaining 2 weren't amateurs. They adjusted fast, shifting their aim. A round clipped the barrier next to Derek's head, and he barely had time to duck. "Travis!" he called. "I see it!" Without missing a beat, Travis flanked right, catching the second target off guard. A burst of simulated rounds hit their opponent's vest, signaling a kill. 2 down. The last one tried to retreat, but Derek was faster. He swung his rifle up, locked onto the moving figure, and pulled the trigger. 3 down. Silence. Only their ragged breathing filled the space. Then, through the dissipating smoke, Hayes's voice cut through. "Not bad, Carter." "Not bad, Connors." Derek exhaled, lowering his weapon. Travis rolled his shoulders. "Could have done it faster." Derek shot him a look. "You're welcome for the assist," Travis smirked. "Don't get used to it." But for the first time, there was no resentment in his voice. Just respect. The simulation ended, but Derek's pulse was still hammering in his ears. Sweat dripped down his face as he pulled off his helmet, feeling the weight of the exercise settle into his bones. Travis was breathing just as hard beside him, his expression unreadable as they stepped out of the training zone. Sergeant Hayes stood waiting, arms crossed over his broad chest. His gaze flickered between them before he spoke. "Not bad, but not good enough." Derek barely suppressed a groan. "We took them down." "Yeah," Hayes said, his voice sharp. "After getting yourselves pinned in the first place. That hesitation? It gets soldiers killed." Travis clenched his jaw but didn't argue. He knew better than to challenge Hayes outright. "Next time, don't just react. Control the battlefield," Hayes continued. Dismissed. Derek exhaled as he turned away, rolling his shoulders. He knew Hayes was right. Every mistake here meant failure out there in the real world, where no second chances existed. Eliana appeared at his side, smirking. "I see you two finally learned how to function like actual teammates." Travis scoffed. "Don't get used to it." Eliana chuckled. "Oh, I won't. I'm sure you'll be at each other's throats again by tomorrow." Derek shot her a look but didn't deny it. They made their way toward the mess hall, exhaustion settling into their limbs. The buzz of conversation surrounded them, but Derek barely registered it. His mind was still stuck on the simulation, replaying every misstep. "You're overthinking again," Eliana said, nudging him. "I don't like screwing up," Derek admitted. "You didn't," she countered. "You adapted. That's what matters." Travis, walking just ahead of them, spoke without turning around. "She's right. Not that I'd ever admit it again." Derek huffed a small laugh. "Good to know you're capable of learning." Travis shot him a middle finger over his shoulder, making Eliana snicker. For all their differences, something had shifted. The tension wasn't gone, but it had changed. There was still competition, but now it felt different. Less about proving something and more about pushing each other forward. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't just surviving this place anymore. Maybe they were starting to belong. The cafeteria was buzzing with chatter, trays clattering against metal tables as soldiers in training piled in after the grueling session. Derek grabbed a plate, but his appetite was barely there. His mind was still on the simulation, on Hayes's words. "Control the battlefield. Don't hesitate." Across from him, Travis stabbed his fork into a pile of mashed potatoes. "You're still thinking about it." Derek glanced up. "Yeah, and?" Travis shrugged. "Just saying, if you dwell too much on the mistakes, you'll miss the lessons." Eliana slid into the seat beside Derek, resting her chin on her hand. "Wow. Travis Connors giving actual advice? Are we in a parallel universe?" Travis scoffed. "Don't get used to it." Eliana smirked but didn't push further. Instead, she turned to Derek. I know that look. You're beating yourself up over nothing. It's not nothing, Derek muttered, pushing his food around his plate. If we were in a real firefight, that hesitation could have been deadly. Travis leaned back. Yeah, but it wasn't real. That's the whole point of training, to make mistakes here so we don't make them out there. Derek sighed. He knew they were right, but that didn't make it any easier to shake the weight in his chest. Eliana nudged his arm. You're too hard on yourself, Carter. You did good today. Derek met her gaze. There was something steady in her eyes, something that made the frustration ease just a little. He exhaled, finally taking a bite of his food. Fine, he said. I'll try to stop obsessing. Good, Eliana said with a satisfied nod. Because tomorrow's going to be worse. Derek frowned. What do you mean? Travis smirked. You didn't hear? We've got night drills, full combat scenarios. Derek groaned, letting his head drop against the table. Of course we do. Eliana chuckled. Better rest up, soldier. We're just getting started. Derek sighed but couldn't help the small grin tugging at his lips. No matter how brutal the training got, at least he wasn't facing it alone. The night was thick with humidity, the air still except for the faint rustling of leaves in the distance. The training ground looked completely different under the cover of darkness. Shadows stretched unnaturally, turning the familiar terrain into a maze of uncertainty. The only light came from the dim glow of the moon, casting eerie silver outlines over the scattered barriers and structures. Derek crouched low, gripping his rifle as he moved through the tall grass. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. Beside him, Eliana was just as focused, her eyes scanning ahead. Travis was somewhere to their right, covering their flank. Eyes sharp, Eliana whispered. This isn't gonna be easy? Derek smirked. Since when has it ever been? A sharp whistle cut through the silence. The signal. The drill had begun. Instantly, the darkness erupted with movement. Flashbangs detonated in the distance, sending bursts of blinding light through the night. Gunfire, simulated but deafening, echoed through the training ground. The opposing team was already on the move. Down! Travis hissed. Derek hit the dirt just as a round of blanks whizzed past. The enemy squad was closer than they'd expected. Eliana clicked her earpiece. We need to change position. We're sitting ducks here. Derek glanced at Travis. Cover fire? Travis didn't hesitate. He swung his rifle up and fired into the darkness, forcing the enemy to take cover. Move! Eliana ordered. They sprinted through the shadows, keeping low. Adrenaline pumped through Derek's veins as they ducked behind a fallen tree. His breath came fast, but his mind was clear. Footsteps. Close. Derek held up a fist, signaling the others to stop. He could barely make out the silhouette moving just beyond the tree line. One enemy, maybe two. He locked eyes with Eliana. No words were needed. She nodded. Derek struck first, leaping from cover and taking the enemy by surprise. A burst of simulated rounds hit the soldier's vest, registering the kill. One down. But the second enemy wasn't alone. A third figure emerged from the darkness, faster than expected. Before Derek could react, something hard slammed into his side, knocking him off balance. He hit the ground with a grunt. Derek! Eliana shouted. He looked up just in time to see a rifle barrel aimed straight at his chest. For the first time in the drill, he was the target. Time slowed. The barrel of the enemy's rifle gleamed under the moonlight, pointed directly at Derek's chest. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, but his training kicked in before fear could take hold. Move. With a sharp inhale, Derek twisted his body, rolling to the side just as the enemy fired. The simulated rounds struck the dirt where he had been lying a second before. In a single fluid motion, he swung his rifle up and fired twice. The enemy's vest beeped. Hit. "Derek, on your 6!" Eliana's voice cut through the chaos. No hesitation. Derek spun just as another opponent lunged from the shadows. He barely had time to react before a solid fist slammed into his jaw, sending him stumbling back, Stanquocho in his skull, but he steadied himself, raising his rifle. Too late. The enemy knocked it from his hands. Derek clenched his fists, his instincts screaming at him to fight. The soldier swung again, but this time Derek was ready. He ducked under the punch and drove his shoulder into the attacker's torso, sending them crashing to the ground. The soldier scrambled to recover, but Derek wasn't going to give them the chance. He reached for his sidearm, pulling the trigger twice. The red indicator light on the enemy's vest flashed. Eliminated. "Damn, Carter," Travis muttered through his earpiece. "Took you long enough." Derek exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from his brow. Yeah. Where are you?" "Flanking left. 3 of them ahead, and they're dug in deep," Travis responded. "We need a distraction." Eliana crouched beside Derek, her breathing steady. "I've got an idea." He arched an eyebrow. "I'm listening." A smirk tugged at her lips. "Give me cover. I'm going straight through." "You're insane," Derek said. "Obviously," she shot back. But before he could argue, she was already moving. Derek cursed under his breath and lifted his rifle. "Travis, cover her!" The next few moments were chaos. Eliana darted through the open field, drawing the enemy's fire while Derek and Travis rained simulated bullets from the flanks. One by one, the opposing team fell. And then, silence. The drill was over. The only thing louder than the ringing in Derek's ears was the realization that, for once, they had won. The floodlights flickered on, bathing the training ground in harsh white light. The sudden brightness was blinding after the intensity of the drill, but Derek barely noticed. His chest heaved as he caught his breath, sweat dripping down his temple. They had won. Eliana walked toward him, shaking out her limbs. "That," she said, grinning, "was way too much fun." "You call nearly getting shot fun?" Derek scoffed, but he couldn't help the small smirk tugging at his lips. Travis approached, wiping dirt from his uniform. "Next time, let's try not to use you as live bait, Monroe." Eliana shrugged. "Hey, it worked, didn't it?" Before anyone could respond, a slow, deliberate clapping echoed across the field. They turned to see Sergeant Hayes watching them with his usual unreadable expression. "Not bad," Hayes said. "For rookies." Derek straightened, waiting for the inevitable critique, but Hayes simply crossed his arms. "You adapted under pressure. Carter, your reaction time still needs work, but you didn't freeze. Connors, you finally learned how to follow orders instead of questioning them. And Monroe..." Hayes's gaze flicked to Eliana. "You're reckless, but it paid off. This time..." Eliana grinned. "I'll take it." Hayes studied them for a moment longer, then nodded. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be worse." With that, he walked away, leaving them standing there in the aftermath of their victory. Derek exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "Well, that was unexpected." Travis nudged him. "Don't let it go to your head, golden boy. One win doesn't make us unstoppable." Eliana stretched, sighing. "It's still a win. I'll take what I can get." As they made their way back toward the barracks, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. For the first time since arriving at this base, they weren't just surviving. They were proving themselves. Maybe they weren't just rookies anymore. Maybe, just maybe, they were soldiers. The barracks were quieter than usual that night, exhaustion settling over the soldiers like a thick blanket. Derek sat on the edge of his bunk, untying his boots, the adrenaline from the drill still coursing through his veins. His body ached. His knuckles were sore from the fight. But his mind was sharper than ever. Across the room, Eliana flopped onto her bed with a sigh. Remind me why we signed up for this again? Travis, lying on his back with his hands behind his head, smirked. For the glory, Monroe, the honor, the misery? Eliana finished for him. Exactly. Travis chuckled. Derek shook his head. You two can complain all you want, but you know this was the first time we actually felt, I don't know, like we belonged. Eliana turned her head toward him, her expression unreadable. You really think that? He met her gaze. Yeah, I do. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Eliana smirked, reaching over to playfully shove his shoulder. Careful, Carter. You're starting to sound like a real soldier. Derek chuckled, but deep down, her words struck something real. A sharp knock on the door interrupted the moment. The three of them turned as the door swung open, revealing a stern-faced officer. Carter, Monroe, Connors, General Reynolds wants to see you. Now. The humor in the room evaporated instantly. Derek stood, his pulse kicking up. The general? What could he possibly want with them? Travis sat up, brows furrowed. Did we do something? The officer didn't answer, simply stepping aside to let them pass. Eliana exchanged a glance with Derek before shrugging. Guess we'll find out. As they followed the officer down the dimly lit corridor, the weight of the moment settled over Derek. Something about this felt different. This wasn't another debriefing. This was something bigger. The hallway leading to General Reynolds' office was eerily silent. The sound of their boots against the polished floor, the only thing cutting through the heavy atmosphere. Derek's mind raced with possibilities. Had they done something wrong? Was this about the training drill? The tension between them was unspoken but undeniable. Eliana walked beside him, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Travis, usually the one to crack a joke in tense situations, remained uncharacteristically quiet. That alone told Derek this was serious. The officer escorting them finally stopped in front of a large door, knocking twice before pushing it open. Enter. The voice was deep, commanding. They stepped inside, standing at attention, as the towering figure of General Reynolds came into view. He was an imposing man, broad shoulders, silver hair, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through them. Behind him, the American flag stood tall, adding to the weight of the moment. Reynolds studied them in silence, his gaze sharp. Finally, he spoke. I assume you know why you're here? Derek swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. No, sir. The general's lips pressed into a thin line. He motioned toward a screen on the wall. Surveillance footage from tonight's drill. The screen flickered to life, playing back the final moments of their exercise. The moment Eliana ran into enemy fire. The way Derek and Travis covered her. The strategic way they took down the opposing team. You disobeyed direct protocol, Reynolds said, his tone neutral. And yet, you won. Silence. Eliana finally spoke. With all due respect, sir, the strategy worked. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. This time. But that kind of recklessness gets people killed. Derek tensed, but before he could defend her, the general continued. However, it also proved something important. He turned, facing them fully. You three think differently. You don't just follow orders, you adapt. That's rare. A pause. Then, I'm transferring you to an advanced tactical unit. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Derek blinked. Sir? Reynolds folded his arms. You want to prove you're more than just rookies? Here's your chance. Eliana exhaled sharply. Travis let out a low whistle. Derek's pulse pounded. They had just been given an opportunity of a lifetime. But something told him this was only the beginning. The weight of the general's words settled over them like a storm cloud. An advanced tactical unit? That wasn't just another assignment. It was an entirely different level of warfare. Derek's jaw tightened. He had spent years pushing himself, proving he was more than just another recruit. But this was something bigger. Eliana was the first to break the silence. What exactly does this unit do, sir? Reynolds' eyes darkened slightly, his posture rigid. Classified missions, high-risk operations. You'll be trained in advanced combat strategy, intelligence gathering, and survival tactics beyond what you've learned here. He let the words sink in before adding, This is a one-time offer. You can accept the challenge, or you can walk away. Derek could feel Travis shifting beside him, the tension thick. Walking away wasn't an option, not for him. Eliana smirked slightly, crossing her arms. And if we say yes? Reynolds stepped forward. Then your training starts immediately. No more routine drills, no more standard procedures. You will be held to a different standard. Mistakes will have consequences. His voice was firm, but there was something else beneath it, something that almost sounded like respect. Derek nodded once. I'm in. Travis let out a slow breath before nodding. Hell, if Carter's in, I guess I don't have a choice. Eliana's eyes met Derek's for a fleeting second before she turned back to the general. Looks like you've got yourself a team, sir. For the first time, Reynolds allowed the smallest hint of a smile. Good. He motioned toward the door. Get some rest. You report to your new commanding officer at 0500 sharp. As they turned to leave, Derek's mind was already spinning. This wasn't just another training exercise. This was real. This was the kind of opportunity that could change everything. As they stepped back into the hallway, Travis let out a low chuckle. What the hell did we just sign up for? Eliana nudged him with her elbow. Something insane, obviously. Derek didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Because deep down, he already knew. This was only the beginning of something much bigger than any of them could have imagined. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Derek lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, his mind refusing to slow down. The room was silent except for the occasional rustle of fabric as the others shifted in their beds. Eliana had turned toward the wall, her breathing steady but not deep enough to indicate sleep. Travis was on his back, arms crossed over his chest, lost in thought. They all knew what tomorrow meant. It wasn't just another day of training. It was the start of something unknown. The thought should have been exhilarating, but instead, it sat in Derek's chest like a weight. Finally, he sighed, swinging his legs over the edge of his bed. I can hear you thinking, Eliana muttered without turning around. Travis snorted. Same. It's annoying. Derek smirked, rubbing his face. If you two are so bothered, why aren't you sleeping? Eliana rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling. Hard to sleep when you don't know what you're waking up to. That was the truth, wasn't it? They had no idea what awaited them at 0500. No drills, no sergeant barking orders about standard procedure. This was something else. something bigger. Travis exhaled loudly. We probably should get some rest, though. Don't want to look like zombies on our first day. Eliana smirked. Speak for yourself. I always look good. Despite everything, Derek chuckled. He shook his head and lay back down, staring at the ceiling once more. Whatever happens tomorrow, we stick together. There was a pause before Travis responded, his voice lighter but carrying an edge of sincerity. Damn right. Eliana didn't say anything, but Derek saw the way she glanced over at them before turning back toward the wall. That was enough. Morning came faster than any of them would have liked. The sharp buzz of their alarms had them up instantly, their exhaustion overshadowed by adrenaline. They moved quickly, dressing in their combat gear, double-checking their laces, securing their equipment. No words were needed as they stepped outside into the cold morning air. Their new reality was waiting. The early morning air was crisp, biting against their skin as Derek, Eliana, and Travis stepped into the training yard. The usual routine of recruits jogging in formation or running drills was absent here. This place was different, quieter, more intense. A tall, rigid man with a sharp gaze stood at the center, hands clasped behind his back. He wore no visible rank, but his presence alone commanded authority. His eyes swept over them like a blade. You three are late. His voice was like steel. Derek frowned, glancing at his watch. Sir, it's 0458. The man stepped forward, locking eyes with him. Then you should have been here at 0455. Eliana barely hid her smirk. Travis cleared his throat. Names. The man's tone left no room for hesitation. Derek Carter. Eliana Monroe. Travis Connors. The man studied them for a second longer before nodding. I am Lieutenant Hayes. You are now part of Ghost Unit. That means 3 things. You follow orders, you push past limits, and you do not fail. Understood? Yes, sir, they responded in unison. Hayes motioned to a rack of weighted vests. Gear up, 10-mile run, no brakes. Travis let out a barely audible groan. Eliana shot him a warning look before they all grabbed their vests, securing the heavy straps. As soon as the weight settled on his shoulders, Derek knew this was going to be hell. Move. They took off, boots pounding against the dirt. The first mile was easy, adrenaline kept them steady. By the third, their breathing turned heavier. By the 5th, sweat dripped down their temples, muscles aching. Hayes ran alongside them, not a single bead of sweat on his forehead. He didn't speak, didn't encourage, didn't slow down. By mile 8, Travis cursed under his breath. This guy a machine or what? Derek ignored the burning in his legs, pushing forward. Eliana matched his pace, her face set in determination. Mile 10. They stumbled to a stop, gasping. Hayes barely looked winded. He eyed them, unimpressed. That was slow. Travis dropped his hands onto his knees, panting. Slow? Are you serious? Hayes ignored him, stepping closer. Ghost Unit does not run. We endure. Get used to it. Derek wiped sweat from his brow, his jaw tightening. This was only day 1, and it was already a war. The moment they caught their breath, Lieutenant Hayes didn't let them rest. No time to recover. On the ground. 50 push-ups, now. Derek barely stifled a groan, but he dropped instantly. The dirt was cool against his palms, but the weight on his back from the vest made every push-up feel like lifting a boulder. Travis struggled beside him, mumbling, "This man really wants me dead." Eliana, breathing hard, didn't complain. She never did. Her arms trembled slightly, but her form remained solid, determination burning in her eyes. Hayes paced around them like a wolf circling prey. Your bodies will break before your minds do. But here's the catch. If your minds are weak, your body won't even get a chance to prove itself. By the time they hit 50, their arms felt like jelly. Derek's chest burned, his shoulders screamed, but he clenched his teeth and pushed through. Hayes wasn't done. Up! Grab a weapon! They scrambled to their feet, rushing toward the training rack where rifles were lined up. The second Derek's fingers wrapped around the cold metal of an M4, Hayes barked out the next order. Live fire simulation. Objective: reach the checkpoint without getting killed. He gestured toward the obstacle course stretching across the field. If a red light hits you, consider yourself dead. Eliana's eyes narrowed. And if we all die? Hayes smirked. Then you run it again, until you get it right. The simulation began. Sirens blared, automatic turrets activated, flashing red lights across the course. Trenches, barbed wire, and wooden barriers created a maze of chaos. Derek sprinted forward, adrenaline surging. He dove behind a stack of sandbags just as a red beam shot past his shoulder. Travis cursed, barely avoiding a hit as he threw himself into a trench. This is insane! Eliana moved like a ghost, swift and precise, pressing against a barricade, scanning the field. We go left. Cover fire, then push. Derek nodded. They moved in sync, Eliana firing precise shots at the turret sensors, Derek and Travis advancing. Every second was a game of life and death. As they neared the final checkpoint, Hayes stood there watching, arms crossed. They had almost made it. Then, a red light flashed against Derek's chest. Simulation failed, and Hayes only gave a single order. Again. Derek clenched his jaw, staring at the red light glowing on his chest. His muscles ached, sweat dripped from his forehead, and his heart pounded with frustration. They had been so close. Hayes didn't give them time to dwell on failure. Back to the starting line. Move. Eliana wiped her face with the back of her hand, her expression unreadable. Travis groaned but dragged himself up. They returned to their positions, gripping their rifles tighter this time. Adapt or die, Hayes called out. Ghost unit doesn't fail. Again! The sirens blared once more. The turrets activated. This time, Derek wasn't just running. He was calculating. He sprinted low, diving behind a barricade, watching the pattern of the red lights. The sensors track movement, he murmured to himself. Too predictable. Eliana was already moving differently, shifting directions every few steps to throw off the tracking. Travis followed, but his movements were still too sluggish. A red beam barely missed his head. Travis, stay sharp! Eliana snapped. They moved again, faster, sharper. Eliana shot out the nearest turret sensor. Derek covered her as she slid into a trench. Travis followed, his breath ragged. Halfway through, they were still in the game. Then a turret swiveled sharply. The red beam flashed toward Eliana. She hit the ground in an instant, rolling behind a crate. The shot barely grazed her. Holy shit, Travis whispered. That was close. Don't stop, she hissed. We have one shot at this. Derek's mind worked fast. Split up. They can't track all of us at once. Eliana nodded, dashing right. Travis hesitated but went left. Derek bolted straight ahead, firing at the turrets, forcing them to adjust their aim. The checkpoint was just meters away. One last sprint. Derek dove. The second his boots hit the line, a siren blared. Green. Checkpoint secured. He turned, breathless, as Eliana and Travis landed beside him, both untouched. They had done it. Hayes walked up, his expression unreadable. He studied them, then nodded. Better. His voice was flat, but there was something in his eyes, something almost like approval. Then he turned away. Get some water, he said. You'll need it for what's next. Derek exchanged a look with Eliana. If this was just the beginning, they had no idea what the cold water felt like heaven against Derek's dry throat. But he barely had time to savor it before Hayes spoke again. Final test, he announced, his voice cutting through the tense silence. You either pass this or you walk away. No second chances. Eliana tightened her grip on her rifle. Travis shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Hayes led them into a darkened facility, its walls lined with monitors and surveillance feeds. At the center of the room stood a single chair, restraints attached to the armrests. Derek felt a chill crawl down his spine. Hayes gestured toward the chair. One of you sits, the other two watch. The test is simple. You endure. Travis swallowed hard. Endure what exactly? Hayes gave a cold smile. Find out. Silence fell. No one moved. Then Eliana stepped forward. I'll do it. Derek turned to her. Eliana, I've got this, she said, her voice steady. She sat in the chair without hesitation. Hayes secured the restraints. The room darkened further, and suddenly a series of flashing images played on the monitors. Violent, disorienting, designed to break the mind. Derek's fists clenched as he watched Eliana's body tense. Her breathing grew uneven. Travis looked away, his face pale. Minutes passed, then more. Eliana trembled slightly, but she never broke, never screamed, never begged. Then, silence. The images stopped. Hayes observed her for a moment, then unfastened the restraints. You pass. Eliana exhaled shakily but stood, her legs only slightly unsteady. Hayes turned to the rest of them. Ghost Unit isn't about strength, it's about resilience. You three, welcome to the team. Derek felt a mix of exhaustion and relief, but mostly pride. They had survived. As they stepped out into the morning light, Eliana met his gaze. Told you I had it. He chuckled, shaking his head. Yeah, you did. Travis exhaled deeply. We're gonna regret this, aren't we? Eliana smirked. Probably. But for the first time, as they stood side by side, battle-worn yet unbroken, Derek knew one thing for sure. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were legends in the making.